analysis in instructional design. Obviously, we know that analysis takes place once you do a performance analysis and you know what the problem is, who the client is, and all that stuff. You're ready to do a analysis that we do in instructional design as part of ADDIE or any process. Dick and Carey, Smith and Reagan, doesn't really matter. Kemp, it doesn't matter what model you're using. They all have some kind of analysis. You always have to know what the problem is before you can start designing training on it. So we do some kind of analysis, and it takes place before we start doing design. Or during, we can do analysis and design sometimes at the same time. It all depends on how we're, our time crunch and all that kind of thing, who our client is and everything. So we begin the analysis with something that I call the project charter. This isn't something traditional that you see in an instructional design book, but you definitely see it in a project management book. And I don't want to confuse this with a project charter for a project management plan, although this can be part of it. And if you have one of those, you might just be able to use that or use part of it. But anyway, the project charter should really contain the basic information. So it should contain the information from your performance analysis or front-end analysis. Who is the problem? Who are the people working on this project? Who are the managers? Who are the SMEs? What is the problem? Why are we solving this problem? What's the return on investment of solving it? Do we have a budget? Do we have some kind of schedule? Now, if we don't know any of this stuff, it becomes really difficult to start the instructional design process, which is why front-end analysis has to have been done. If it's not been done, well, you have to gather this information before you can start. Now, obviously, if you're an internal instructional designer working for a client, you know a lot of the stuff already. You know who your client is and the problem. So that's a different scenario. But, I'm coming at this as the person who doesn't have anything starting from completely scratch. So the first part of an instructional design, the analysis should really be coming up with, what is this project I'm doing? All right. Then we get into, so once we know all of that stuff, we know who the client is and everything, we start doing several things. And we do these at the same time. They're learner analysis, context analysis, and if we haven't done it yet, we do a gap analysis. But we do these all at the same time where we're learning and getting to know our client. Some people think of ADDIE as this traditional, you have to do this analysis, it takes weeks or months. No, yes, good analysis takes as long as it takes to find the solution to the problem. But sometimes you only have an hour to do an analysis. Sometimes it's a meeting. Sometimes the client comes to you and they give you stuff and they say, you need to do this. So you don't have much time. But an analysis is gathering that intro information to get started. So I'm kind of going through what are the best practices of everything you can gather. So we start with a learner analysis. That's really, who are the learners? Who are the users? Who are the people that are going to use this training that I'm giving them? What is their level of education? Can they use computers? Can they use smartphones? What is their age? What are their motivations? What are their work conditions like? Are you training highly skilled surgeons, or are you training a guy working on an engine? And do either of those people even have time to take your training? Because I've trained surgeons before and they don't have any free time. All their time is dedicated to doing surgery. So they were, seeing patients, and they were like, we don't have time to do an hour of training. So what's their job like? And do they prefer a certain kind of training? Or are they used to online courses? Are they used to going and sitting in a classroom? Because those are, things that you need to consider. Because if they're not used to doing something, you might have to go through a change process. I've had to give training where not only did I have to teach the students to come in and take a training course, but I had to teach them how to turn on a computer. And this wasn't this wasn't too long ago, so I'm not talking about 1970 or something like that, where computers weren't common, because there are a lot of people that surprisingly don't use them. In a lot of texts, you'll kind of see people to look for learning styles here. Remember, there's not a lot of research for learning styles, so we're not really looking for that in our learner analysis. We might look at what the learner preferences, but those are not the same thing. There isn't really no learning style, so we're not looking for that here. Next, we have our context analysis. And that's like, what kind of conditions will the learners use these new skills? Like, where are they using this? What are the skills they have to learn? Like, what are we trying to teach them? What kind of conditions will these learners be trained in? Are we going to teach them in computer labs? What are those computer labs like? What kind of technology is there? Are we doing this online training? Do they have a learning management system? If so, what kind? This is where we start to answer the questions of where are we doing this? How are we doing this? What are the environments like? What technology is available, and what's the budget like for that technology? Sometimes I get a no right away, like, yeah, we want it to be online. Oh, we don't have a learning management system. Oh, yeah, we want computer-based training. Well, how are you going to house it? Well, we don't know. Can we put it on your website? No. We don't know how to do that. So, you have to start to really figure out all that kind of stuff with the client. And walk them through that stuff, because a lot of times they don't know, they haven't even thought through any of this stuff. They have like this grand idea of, hey, we need this training, we want to do it. They kind of just think you can sit down and do training, and they haven't thought through all the pre-stuff that really goes into it. And then we have our gap analysis. Now, if you've done a front-end analysis or performance analysis, using something like HPT or something like that, you've already done a gap analysis, so you should know this stuff. A lot of times I get into a project where the client kind of comes to me with that performance. Like, they know what their problem is and they kind of have it. But I need to do this gap analysis with them. If we don't have it, if I can't sit there and look at it, it hasn't been done by an instructional designer, I really need to do it. Because I for them, and this is where I do that. So the gap analysis is really where you look at what is the current state, what do they have versus what do they want. And then I come up with potential solutions. So the gap analysis is current state, what's the current thing, what do they currently have, what's the desired state, what do they want. And they might have a dream desired state, but I have potential solutions. And what are all the potential solutions? Because sometimes they have a desired state, but I'm going to present them with like 3 to 4 different solutions and say, here's option 1, which does solve your problem, but maybe not completely. Option 2, 3, 4. And you do that based on, your client doesn't always have time for their desired state. They don't always have the budget for their desired state. So I might give them different scenarios and say, here's option 1, which does, to solve your problem, but it's not everything you want. So sometimes you have to present that to them. And I look at and that's where I really look at, I have another column listed here, which are impacts of those solutions. How do each of these solutions really impact the company? What is the return on investment? And that's why I might present them with 4 scenarios and say, okay, so which of these works within your time, budget, quality, scope? Which one of these do you really want? Because that's what's important, is getting the client to agree, because right here's the point where your customer, client, or if you're just the person, you have to figure out, well, here is my solution. You've met with them, you've been learning about their company, you know who the learners, users are, so you're ready to come up with a solution. All right, so once we've come up with a solution, we write our goal statement, right? We know what the problem is, we know what the solution is, the client has agreed to it, we're ready to define our goals for the project. So what is our goal? Like, what are we doing? So we have 2 kinds of goals that we really want to write. The first one is a project goal, and a project goal is related to the overall project. Like, project goal, project will be completed in budget. Project will be completed by quarter 3, of this year. Things like that. Those are your project goals. You don't usually see them written about in instructional design books because they're more of a project management thing. But look, if you're trying to be an instructional designer and you're going to be writing proposals, when you write a proposal, you have to write project goals, instructional goals. You have to write both of them for the client, because they need to see here, what are the project goals, and then they need to see, like, what are the instructional design goals. Project management and instructional design are really linked. You can't do one without the other. They have to be taught together in unison like this. You have to know that in that needs and out, in that beginning section, this is all the stuff I'm doing as an instructional designer. All right, so then we have our instructional goals. These are our goals for instruction. These aren't things like, these are not objectives. These are not specific. They are what you're going to do for the project. I'm going to teach the learners how to fly a plane. something, they're very broad, very specific. It's the stuff we're going to do. For example, I have here a goal for you, the person watching this video, is learners will be able to perform a needs analysis, do the whole analysis. Now, that's not very specific, but it's a nice broad goal statement of what I could want someone to do. Now, that's not an objective. Now, let me show you. When I talk about goals, I like to just mention objectives so that you see how the difference between those two, because I think it needs to be very clear. So, a goal is not specific. It's very general, abstract. It's not an objective. An objective is very specific, is measurable, so easily measurable. A goal, it can be measurable too, fly a plane, can they do it or not, kind of thing, but it's not specific. It's not broken down into specific tasks. So an example of an objective, so let's say my goal is to learner will be able to perform a needs analysis. An objective could be, given XYZ case scenario, the learner will be able to conduct a context analysis. So now we're getting much more specific into that. And I could even get more and more specific, like given XYZ case, given a context analysis, the learner will be able to identify what the environment's like. We can start to get very specific. Those are objectives. I could write many objectives based on one goal. Once we do that, we're ready for our goal analysis or our task analysis, depending on what author you're using, what language they're using. So once you know your goals, you're ready to break them down into skills and knowledge so that you can make sure that you know exactly what the learners need to know. You need to know what they need to know. Because this allows us to start design. After this, we're ready to start creating our learning objectives. We're ready to, start designing our assessments. We're ready to start designing storyboards and get this going, right? So we do this task analysis. It's so important to get this done correctly. And one thing about the task analysis is you have to make sure that this gets approved by your client. It needs to be quality checked because we have our goals, we have our solution, we have our goals. Now it's ready to come up with, these are all the tasks the learners are going to perform. And you have to work with your SME in this part too, if you're not the SME. So we do two things. One is I determine the domains of learning that I'm going to use. What kind of tasks am I doing? And I break down the tasks. We have domains of learning. Have you heard of Bloom's taxonomy before? It's one of the most well-known. In Bloom's taxonomy, they define 3 domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Cognitive is our mental, our thoughts, our knowledge, like high level, low level knowledge, problem solving, recall. Affective is our emotions, attitudes, beliefs. Psychomotor are like hands-on skills, like doing things manual, like physical, like actually doing stuff. So we figure out what kind of learning are we doing. In my experience in instructional design, most training is going to be cognitive. It's going to fall in that cognitive level. Like 99 out of 100 projects will be in that realm. And obviously this can vary depending on what kind of work you're really doing, but most of the time it does. And from here, once we figure this out, we're going to start breaking our tasks down. So, assuming we have this cognitive, which we probably always do, even if we're doing like psychomotor, like doing something like the fly a plane example, there's still lots of cognitive tasks there, like what is an engine? How do we identify an engine? How do I identify emergency lights? What is this? What is that? So there's a lot of cognitive stuff to it. So this is where we are starting to, in our mind, planning our instructional strategies in our head. We're always planning ahead in our mind and thinking ahead to design during this task analysis. So cognitive usually consists of 2 types of knowledge, high level and low level. So we have our main goal, and we are starting to think like, what are our tasks that we have to do? All right, so now it's time to start to actually come up with our tasks or our goals. It seems very difficult at first to do this, and I think the hardest part of a task analysis is knowing when to stop. All right, so here's how we do a task analysis. And I see a lot of confusion on this on the web, and even in the text, everyone kind of explains it somewhat. they all explain it the same, yet there are different sections of it, and I don't feel like I ever get good explanations. So I'm going to talk to you about how I really do it in practice, how it works. But basically what you're doing is you're trying to come up with every single skill that can be done, that the learner needs to do in order to solve whatever your problem goal is. Every single skill involved to solve that. Okay, so first we just determine what content, skills, or processes need to be trained. So we start to, talk to our clients, do observations, document analysis, work with a SME, do interviews, maybe conduct surveys, depending on what you have available. We determine what kind of content we have. Is it hierarchical content where we have goals? What are the main things? Is there steps? Are we training them all on procedures? Is it a mixture of both? What do we have really? You'll see a lot of authors describe more types of tasks than hierarchical or procedural, but really you can pretty much put everything in one of those two and it fits. But I start to think about how this content is organized. So I come up with a list of goals, or a list of pretty high level, what are the main things the learner's going to be doing in this training. So, fly a plane example. What do they really need to know? They need to know how to, so they need to know how to start a plane. They need to know how to steer a plane. They need to know how to read the instruments. They need to know how to eject. And they need to know how to land a plane and take off. So I have those 10 things. I start to break down all of those tasks. And I get to the point where I've listed every single thing they could possibly need to do. Once I've done that, I prioritize those tasks. I usually put them in some kind of table and I rate them. I say, this is how important the task is. I rate it on a 1 through 10. Is this important? High is 10, 1 is low. Is this, how long will it take to probably train someone to do this? Is this a hard cognitive task or not? And I'll probably rate it there. And I'll probably do how much will it cost to train this thing too. The reason I do that is because a lot of times, a client has a great idea, but they don't always know what they really want to train. And not only do they not know what they want to train, but they don't have the budget. They think they might have the budget, but once we get into the task analysis and really figure out what they're trying to do and see all those skills, a lot of time budget needs to be revisited and revised. Sometimes they only have an hour long. We have an hour training. Maybe it's government mandated 1 hour, but their goal that they originally had is many hours. Once you break down the tasks and see what it really involves, you find out, whoa, hey, we can't really do this. So it's really a good quality check. That's why I like to prioritize, because if I prioritize, I can say, okay, well, we only have an hour. We're going to do these 5 things. We're going to skip these 2 for now. Maybe we're going to do them in the next time. Or, you're trying to get a project done quick and time, and maybe you are going to do everything in the task analysis, but you're trying to roll stuff out quick. So we're going to do the first 2 tasks now, get them going, and we're going to come back on tasks 3 and 4. So you really have to, that's why I like to prioritize. I keep breaking this content down until simple steps. So this is where my learner analysis really becomes important, because I need to know what do these learners really know? When can I stop breaking this down? Because I can break down the task of flying a plane to learner will identify what a plane is. These guys know what a plane is. They're a pilot, probably. Maybe I'm teaching them night flying. They know the pilot. They know how to start the plane. But I can keep breaking tasks down that much. I mean, think about this. If I'm teaching someone to use their toothpaste or something like that, I'm teaching someone how to brush their teeth. Do I need to teach them what is toothpaste? Do I need to break down teaching someone how to brush their teeth to what is toothpaste? I don't know. What is a toothbrush? What are different they're hard or soft bristles? So you start to think do I need to break it down that far? If I was teaching someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, when I say turn the lid of the peanut butter to unscrew it, do I need to teach them how to unscrew a lid before I even get there? Or can I just say unscrew the lid? Do they know how to unscrew a lid or not? So you have to learn how to break tasks down. For example, on the screen I have a picture here. If you're listening to this via podcast, I'll kind of explain it. But I go from, so I have a flow chart here. It starts with an instructional goal, and you'll see if you're looking at any of the books, Dick and Carey, Smith and Reagan, they all, Kemp, they all have a very similar chart for a task analysis, which begins with what is the goal. And then we have our main steps or our main goals in the instruction. So I have step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for step 1, I've broken that down into a numbering system where step 1 is 1.0. And then below step 1, there are these smaller tasks, which are 1.1, task 1.2, task 1.3. And I've broken task 1.1 down even further into 1.1.1 and 1.1.2. So you keep breaking a task down further and further and further until you figure out every single thing the learner needs to do. Now on the right-hand side, I have high level and low level, which indicates knowledge. Like the high level knowledge is higher, like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are probably like high level tasks, like problem solving type tasks. And I'm breaking those down into low level. What is all the content needed to actually do them? Okay, so here's an example of it starting to be filled out. So I have the main problem. My goal is to survive your first night in Minecraft. For those of you that play Minecraft, you will know exactly what you're talking about. So I have a bunch of like the main steps, my 1, 2, 3, 4 steps for surviving your first night in Minecraft, or my goals, or my high level like problems that the learner is going to solve are: they want to build a shelter, they need to create light, they need to see, they need to gather food because they need to eat, and they need to learn how to fight creepers because they might have to fight. And then what I do is so in order to survive your first night in Minecraft, which is my goal, you need to be able to do these 4 things. Then I need to break those 4 things down into all the things that you need to do them. So like in order to build a shelter, I have an example, you need to be able to use a pickaxe. All right. In order to use your pickaxe, you have to first be able to identify materials because you need to know what you should be pickaxing. And then in order to identify materials, I could even break that task down even further and say, I need to know how to move. I need to know the controls of the game. I need to know how to use a mouse. I need to know how to turn on a computer. Do I need to break it down that far? I don't know. So knowing your learners, knowing when to, hey, I don't need to break it down this far. I'm far enough at identify materials. That's as far as I need to break this down. Okay. Dude, I need to have instructions on how to play the game. Well, maybe they already know. Okay, so I can start with, so I know that in order to teach someone how to build a shelter, before we start teaching someone that, we need to make sure they know, have they identified materials somewhere? Do they know how to use the pickaxe? Okay, now we can start teaching them how to build a shelter because they know the basic stuff to get there. And there's other stuff to build a shelter, like they need to know how to mix the materials together and build and all that stuff. I just didn't include that. This is a very small, very simple example. I have another one on the next screen too. But you can see the point of the task analysis is to identify every single thing the learner needs to do. Here's another example. This one is more procedural. How to install, my goal, install an app on the iPad. Okay, so first part, step 1.0, turn the iPad on. Step 2.0, open the App Store. Step 2.1, search for desired app. Step 2.2, select the app. Step 2.2.1, enter password, because when you go to install, when you select the app, you have to enter your password. Step 3.0, close the App Store. Step 4, go to the main screen of the iPad and watch app installing. Step 4.1, should get a message that the app is installed. Step 5.0, click on app to open it and test it. And I could break those steps down even further. Am I missing? Like the point is for the client and the subject matter expert and you to look at this goal of installing an app and say, what isn't here? And you keep breaking it down and adding what isn't here until you have it all. This is how you know, hey, my training is actually going to work because, well, at least I have all the steps. I have all the correct content there because I am going to make sure that I have content on how to do each one of these things so that the learner knows how to install an app on the iPad. That's the whole point of the task analysis, is to be able to do that. So that I can start writing over here, okay, now I know I've identified all the tasks. This is like the list of all the content I should be using to create this training. All right. So here's what so that's an instructional analysis. That's what you do. That's the analysis. Here is what I find, like let's say I was writing this up for a client, what does my analysis look like? So here's what a sample here are the things that you would include in a sample document to a client. This is what I would give them. If I was giving them this as a deliverable, here's what it would look like. And obviously, depending on the client, you may or may not be submitting this. There may be something extra. Always changes. The process of how you do instructional design can change based on every client. It's a matter of, have I done some kind of analysis, and do I have this basic information here? So the first thing that I have is I have a summary of the case. That's that project charter that I talked about. Who's the client? What's the problem? What's my budget? What's my schedule? When am I having this done by? Describe my, that performance analysis findings. The who, what, where, when, why are we doing this kind of thing. A short summary of who is my client, like what kind of company do they have, how many people are we training. Then we have the learner, a section for the learners. Who are the learners? The learner analysis. Who are they? We're doing that learner analysis there. We have a section for the context analysis. What's this environment like that we're conducting this training, and where are they going to be using this training at? So, then we have the results of our needs analysis and gap analysis. Here's what they want. Here were some potential solutions provided. Here's what the clients chose. We have our solution. Here's our solution. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the schedule. Here's when it's going to be done. These are basic things that I have to include in a proposal. Like if I'm writing a proposal to a client, these are the things that are there. These are very, very, very important. All right. Once I have my solution for my client, I start to create what are my goals? So the solution is, here's the problem, here's how we're going to solve it. Here are my goals, my main goals. So I start to come up, once I have my main goals, client agrees with all this stuff, we're good, I can actually start working on my task analysis, goal analysis, and come up with, here's all the stuff that needs to be done. Now that really, once I start that task analysis, is really, kind of some people put it in the design phase, some will put it in analysis. It doesn't really matter where you put it. It is an analysis, so it's really an analysis phase. And that kind of stuff does not matter at all. As long as you're doing it, right? You're getting the task analysis, we're ready to go into design and start writing our learning objectives. And that's it. That's what the document, the outline structure of what the analysis would look like in instructional design. Thank you.